Hi, I'm Bob Resselman, and I'm here at Outer Edge 2023 at the LA Convention Center in downtown LA. It's one of the premier NFT shows in the country, and I'm having the pleasure of interviewing Jack O'Halloran of Skale Labs. Welcome, Jack.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I've been excited to hear about what you're doing. You're doing a lot in the distributed ledger space, aren't you?
Yeah. So I've been working on Scale for over 5 years now, and it's a decentralized project where we have over 20 EVM chains that are running in a fully decentralized manner. And our goal is to help people who are building applications for Ethereum, build them and reach a huge audience, not a small audience of developers, but a massive audience of consumers and real users across gaming and Web3 social apps and decentralized finance.
Right. So one of the problems that's always been around what we call distributed ledger technology and Ethereum and EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, has been just around the cost of transactions as well as the speed of transactions. How does that fit into your world? Is that something you've encountered?
Well, that's a problem we've been trying to solve or working on solving. I think doing a pretty good job over the last 5 years. One, I think, hats off to Ethereum, just the creation of such an amazing technology and pool of users and pool of money and value that's sitting there in this network. It's amazing, but we all know that it's very expensive to transact. And one of the issues is it's both infrastructure and unit economics. And so there's a lot of different ways people are taking to try to solve this gas issue. We, for example, believe the best route is utilizing a prepayment model. So applications, businesses, groups of users, organizations, DAOs, et cetera, can actually pay in advance for the compute space required to run transactions, which completely transforms the unit economic model. Now, you still can have validators that are running proof of stake blockchains, which is happening in Scale, but the way they're paid is different. It's not per transaction. It's like renting a car, but you pay for the month instead of paying by the mile.
Wow, that's a really interesting way of doing it. Not for a layman's explanation, how do you manage to pull it off, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'll try to step back first, and then we can get more deep. But essentially, there are 3 layers here. The first layer is Ethereum. So there's code and smart contracts for Scale that live on Ethereum that support the Scale network. Then the second layer is the Scale network, which is a whole set of nodes that are run fully decentralized. Now, this network actually doesn't even have any blockchains in it. It's a system that creates chains. That's a third layer. The third layer are the app chains or the Scale chains. And each one of these Scale chains is incredibly fast, has more throughput than the major layer 1 chains, a lot of them that you read about today, and layer 2 chains. And so this layer 3 environment or app chain environment, I think, is a future. And there's a lot of people that are looking at this model and saying, hey, by decoupling the infrastructure, making different trade-offs for security and performance, this model is one that allows the computation to be instead of divided and managed in a vertical manner, to be spread out in a horizontal manner so that there's more even distribution, and you can essentially get more throughput and more volume by creating more quantity without losing security. So happy to kind of dig into that, but at the highest level, those 3 layers come together to build a unique solution that has speed, security, and decentralization.
Right, and it's a different financial model too, because if we're paying per transaction, that's an operating expense, and so that's the more business I do, the higher my operating expenses go. But if we turn it into a subscription, or we can call it a subscription model if you don't mind. Yeah. Now it becomes, for the most part, pretty much a capital expense. Is that an accurate assessment?
It's decentralized infrastructure as a service. Okay, right. So or platform as a service. So people in enterprise and Web2 figured things out a long time ago that if you want to charge your users each time they use your product, you're going to motivate them to not use your product. Right. So instead, they figured out new business models. And same thing, whether it's not be a user, but an enterprise, it was, pay per byte, don't pay per byte, pay per, seating. And, you buy these seats, use them X amount. If you go higher, then, and so you're motivating people to use your product through subscriptions as opposed to demotivating them by, a per event fee.
Right. So let me toss you a hardball question here. All right. So I'm a fairly good sized enterprise, and I've had success with data storage techniques. technologies, such as say, Oracle, that's pretty canonical, or MongoDB, or SQL Server. If I go open source, I'm using MariaDB. Why should I change? I mean, okay, I get it. It's working for me. I'm willing to pay the price. Where's my benefit?
Well, I mean, one of the way I reframe that to people is, okay, well, these databases that you're talking about are one database that's run by one entity that has a guarantee to deliver accurate information across that database. Blockchains are not efficient. There's not one database. There's lots of databases whose job it is to share the same information and ensure it's accurate. And it's not one party, it's lots of parties. So then the question is, well, that's not as efficient because there's so many more databases that need to operate in harmony at the same time and communicate with each other. So it's going to be slower, not as cost as effective because you're having to replicate these databases. So then the question is, why would you want to do that? And it all comes down to use cases. There's certain use cases where you don't want to trust or rely on one single database to store information. One would be decentralized money, which we all know Bitcoin been popular and people looking at Ethereum as a store of value too, using lots of actors to run servers to guarantee that, we don't all have to trust each other, the money's there. But now let's look at business applications. And the question is, what business applications require decentralized infrastructure compared to centralized infrastructure? And if you can answer that, then you're on the right path and you're not going to be using Oracle or MongoDB.
So you mind? Let's dig a little deeper because this is fascinating to me. What sort of concrete use cases would you want to use a distributed ledger for?
Yeah. So I'm gonna pretend you don't hear the word NFT. Okay. Let's say this is a digital asset that just happens to be an NFT. Right. Let's look at a major sports team. Let's say they wanted to roll out a fan passport that every single fan could buy this passport. And there's different levels. And based off these different levels, I could then go and get free access or first access to tickets, first access to season passes, first access to specialized merchandise or meeting the team, et cetera. Now, you can still do that in a centralized database, but if you're utilizing this in an NFT environment, all of a sudden you automate all the, I sell mine to you and, that could happen anywhere. But when that transaction happens, it happens on chain, and that in an automated manner, payments are sent back to the provider, the team, or the entity. On the user side, you have something that's yours. It is on chain, it's immutable, and it's also a generational thing. The younger generation has really embraced NFTs because they want to own their assets. They also don't want to just just trading collectibles that are scarce that people are speculating on is not the future of NFTs. That's why I think we need different names for these things. But businesses that want to utilize these principles, activate community, activate engagement, drive different revenue streams, need to embrace blockchain in order to make that happen.
Well, that's good. I like that. I like that a lot. Let's talk about the migration path. Okay, so you sold me. All right, I'm CFO. I'm saying, okay, you got me. Sign me up. I want to use this DLT stuff. Yeah. Right? What does the road ahead look like for me?
Yeah. Well, number one, I worked in SaaS back in 2000. I think 9 was when I first started working in SaaS, and half the time I talked to a CIO, they'd say, well, I want on-prem. If you can deliver me the same solution, I don't want to use Amazon. I don't want to. And fast forward, even 5 years later, those same CIOs that were saying they didn't trust the cloud lost their jobs. Okay. Yeah. And in blockchain, we're seeing a similar path where people are like, oh, I want a private blockchain. I don't want these open decentralized networks. And so now we're seeing the same transition where the leading edge in the enterprise who are adopting blockchain are recognizing public open networks are the path. One, for their compliance reasons, it's better. But two, they're less brittle. They're more, that's how you capture community engagement. The values of blockchain are really delivered in an open network compared to a closed network. If I have a closed network, may as well just run MongoDB. I don't need to run a blockchain. And so I think the transition path is one, understanding that open networks can be utilized. And then two, building a technical execution plan. And three, having a compliance plan, because the legal components of this are still being sorted. And you need to make sure you're operating under a manner that is, I think you have a very good plan. And the thing is, people are lucky now, they're not the first ones to do anything. 2 years ago, enterprises were just getting in and they were really having to forage the path on the legal and compliance side.
what sort of staffing changes do we need to make?
Yeah. So one, I think the amount of agencies and consulting companies and implementation companies that have these core competencies has grown immensely. But that being said, you still want to have your own staff that understands these things. So one thing I've found working with businesses that are launching a blockchain, if you don't have somebody in-house who understands Solidity, the concepts of security around blockchain, the concepts of values of decentralization to the users, you're really at the mercy of your vendors and partners. So it is good to have the internal team, but you now have the luxury of not needing to build an entire team yourself. There are enough really quality teams that are out there ready with experience.
Great. And then, of course, there's the other side of the coin. How do I identify a vendor that is other than what they pretend to be?
Well, I think there's a very high charlatan ratio in blockchain. There's a lot of, hype artists, and I don't want to say scam, but you need to look at people's background. And unfortunately, a lot of people with huge depth of experience in enterprise are not like plentifully, there's not a lot of those people working in blockchain, but there are the agencies that are good have experience. So I would not be looking at, giving somebody a first shot at blockchain. The security, the issues that can go wrong are too great. So look at the track record. Most, look at the individuals on the team, get to know them, and look at the projects they have launched. And if they haven't launched, definitely do more shopping.
All right, so let's just take this one step further, and I won't belabor it too much, but let's do it. I'm a CIO, CFO. I've decided I've heard a lot of good things about DLT. We've done the cost analysis, but we understand that we need some help with staffing, and I'm going to interview a vendor. What would be a hardball question to really ask a vendor to make sure they knew what they were doing?
Yeah, I'd get into one. I think on the technical side, there are questions around, like what are the trade-offs we're making around security and performance? The other one would be, how do you think about user experience? Because so many blockchain initiatives have been absolutely killed around user experience. I would be asking, what's your advice on custodial wallets? And should we allow open wallets to exist simultaneously? What vendors should we be looking at for those initiatives? Also, I would be getting at, what are the values of blockchains providing? And everyone needs to ask themselves that. There's so many things like, oh, let's do it. Let's put it on blockchain. But that use case maybe doesn't need to be on blockchain. So I'd be getting into that with those vendors and make sure they understand the business components and they're helping drive that strategy along with the technical side.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a hardball question I would ask, right? And something for me, it would really come down to, send in your CTO or your senior engineer, and then tell me about how you're going to take a look at this Solidity code and tell me what my risks are. How much is the Solidity code going to cost me to run? Yeah. Okay, and how do I make it cheaper? Is that a good question one might ask?
Yeah, I think so. And also, like, what are your thoughts around audits? And how do you evaluate the vendors you work with based off the audits they've done? Right? Because we at Scale work with a lot of these agencies and providers. We're at the infrastructure level. We partner with some really great teams, and they're responsible to be for a lot of this the partner side communications. And one of the things we do is make sure we outfit our partners with really good materials on the audits that have happened, the security properties, the performance advantages. Dartmouth just did a big study recently, and Scale was highlighted as one of the fastest and most secure, actually the fastest blockchain in terms of throughput and finality. And things like that like they should do their homework. They shouldn't just be like, oh, we're friends with this other chain that gave us a big grant. There's a lot of that, unfortunately, in blockchain. There are people that are paying for their business, and I would recommend steering very clear of those.
Okay, great. Well, this has been a great interview, Jack. You really taught me a lot. And I really like engaging in these detailed discussions. So again, I'm here with Jack O'Halloran from Skale Labs, and I'm Bob Resselman from Blockchain Journal. And thanks for sitting through this great interview.